This is strange. This is mighty strange. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of Footy and Stuff. I left you with episode 15 in December, maybe? Let's have a look. Let's have a look. View your channel. That is my channel. What is this? Yeah, episode 15. I left you with that episode in December the 10th. And I decided, you know what? I could take Christmas off. I could take January off. Let's just take every day off until 2 days before the season starts. Technically 1 day, but we're not getting a game tomorrow night now. But we're here for episode 16 of the podcast. And today we're doing predictions, as we always do, which is good. Just me this year. Haven't got the boys with me. But we're going to do it. And we're going to get more right this year. Famous final words. Let's just crack in. Ladder is what we're doing first, obviously. Premiers, runner-up, Brownlow, Coleman, Rising Star. I'll give you a surprise All-Australian. I'll also give you a first-time All-Australian because the first time usually isn't a surprise. It's just someone who hasn't been in who probably deserves it. A breakout star of the year, as we always do. And it's not going to be Zach Reed to disappoint me this year. And recruit of the year. That is what we're doing. And then I'm going to give you 6 bold calls as well because I've got 6 noted down here in front of me. They probably vary from not too bold to extremely bold, not going to happen. But I think I've got a good mix here and we're going to go with it. So let's crack in with the ladder, shall we? Starting off in 18th, we've got the Tigers. No brainer here, in my opinion. I'm not going to overanalyze it too much. Zero expectations. Super young squad. Get games into those kids, see what you can pull together. I've seen people say they might not win a game. I don't think that'll happen. I could expect them to probably still win a couple of games, get a couple of upsets there. If they go above that, 3 or 4 wins is probably above expectations and a really good start for them given the position they're in. They obviously won those 2 games last year, and I think they've seemingly reset even more in terms of squad profile and depth. So, look, anything they can get out of this season is a plus. So 18th, Richmond, done. 17th, I've gone with the Eagles. It felt boring. I wanted to put someone else there because the Eagles are starting to get a few players in. They got Liam Baker in. They've gotten Jack Graham in. They're starting to pull some pieces together. Matt Owies as well. These sort of more mature players. It's not entirely kids anymore. But it just still feels a little bit underdone. I think they're going to struggle one more year. And once they get a few more games into those kids and get a few more pieces together, that's when it's going to start coming together for me. So like I said, I really wanted to put someone else here, but it just feels like Richmond and West Coast are the 2 worst teams. So sometimes you just have to be a bit boring. In saying that, 16th, I've gone St Kilda. That's the team I wanted to put there. Realistically, when you look at St Kilda's list profile and the players that they've got and the point of their rebuild that they're at, they should be a lot better than where I've got them in the bottom 4. But they're just, I don't see it. I just don't see it. And I think they're going to regress this year pretty massively. In saying that, where did they finish last year? Like 13th, 12th. I think they're going to regress is the point I'm making. They were rebuilding at a time where Brisbane were rebuilding, where Carlton were rebuilding, and it just seems like nothing has come of it. I don't think their midfield is anywhere near up to scratch. I don't think their forward line is up to scratch either. I think obviously Max King needs to stay fit and then maybe something comes together there because they have some good small forwards. But it just feels underdone. Their back line is inherently really good, and I think that's tactical. I think that's structure based. Because personnel wise, again, it's probably not as good as a lot of the big back lines in the comp. I just don't love what they've got together. So St Kilda 16th, you got to put someone there. There's a lot of good teams in this comp. Which is something I should have mentioned. It's probably going to be one of the closest seasons ever, and it feels like we say that every year, but it's a good comp. Which brings me to 15th, and it's a team that, if you've been watching this pod, if you've watched this pod at all, you will know that I was very big in finals last year on the Western Bulldogs, and I mean, I said that they were going to win the flag, I'm pretty sure. At the start of finals, I said that they were my little smoky to really, like, from 6th. I think they were 6th. to really jump up and compete, and then they blew it in that elimination final. But yeah, it feels weird for me to put them 15th, but that's where I put them. It's all seemingly fallen apart. They lose Bont for the first month and a half of the year. They've lost Liam Jones for the first month and a half of the year. Trelaw will be gone for a month. Waitman will be gone for half a year. Jamara's not there, and God knows what's happening with that one. It just seems like everything is in disarray. And then you look at their squad without those five key players, and it does nothing for me. I think they're going to really struggle in that first 8 weeks of the year. What they do once they have a full squad back, if they have a full squad back at that point, is up to them. But I don't know if the morale hit that's probably going to be taken has already been taken, but is probably going to be taken by poor results, which I'm expecting them to have. Don't know if that's recoverable. We'll see what happens, but it doesn't seem like the right time for me for the Bulldogs to compete. So I've got them 15th. In at 14th, I've got a team who I picked to fall last year. I don't remember exactly where I put them. I think I had them ninth or 10th after another straight sets exit, which they had a couple of years in a row, and it just ruined them. And that team is Melbourne. A lot of people are picking them to jump back up this year. I think they're going to look a lot better, which is weird because I've got them in the same spot that they finished last year, and that's 14th. But last year was just a mess. Obviously, they'll have track back, hopefully more consistently. Hopefully, his injuries are behind him because he's an absolute gun, and we all love watching him play. Clayton Oliver will probably be a lot better. I just think everything around them has kind of gotten worse. I don't think their backline's gotten any better. They've lost Judd McVie for I don't know how many weeks, but they're losing Judd McVie for the start of the season. Stephen May and Jake Lever aren't getting any better. You go up forward, they still haven't really got that key forward presence that they've been lacking. We've been begging them to get this whole time. So it's everything around that midfield that's seemingly gotten worse, while the midfield might be in a better spot. Ed Langdon's going to play more midfield time. Trent Rivers will continue to play there. They've got Harvey Langford in, Xavier Lindsay as well, who look like two great young prospects. But everything around it, just as I said, doesn't seem up to scratch. So yeah, I've got them 14th. I think the fall off from the start of last year compared to the end of last year was pretty stark. They started decently. I think they were top four in like round 8, 9. And then the back half of the year was just a mess. It was awful. Obviously, mainly due to the Petrarca injury and the morale around the club. But I think it'll be a bit more. I don't want to say consistent because they're not. I don't have them in the 8, so you can't. They're going to be inconsistent. But throughout the year, I think it'll be very topsy-turvy. Um, so yeah, 14th for me. I just couldn't put them above any of the teams I had above them, if that makes sense. Well, I could have put them above the team that I got in 13th, and that's North Melbourne. I don't think anyone who has them in the bottom 3 and the bottom 4 still is wrong inherently, because I think they're kind of in a position now where we can all see the talent that they have now and the players that they have in place. It's just a matter of when um, do those players start to make it work. I think it's going to be sooner rather than later, but I don't think people are wrong for thinking that it's going to take 1 or 2 more years for it to really kick into gear properly. Like they could finish bottom 4 again and then make a massive jump into that top 8 contention, really. But I think they need to make a little jump this year at least. I mean, you've got those massive names that they're going to build everything around: Sheasel, Larkey, LDU. But the names they brought in are really good. The experienced names, obviously Parker, Daniel. We've talked about this on the pod countless times through trade period and whatever. Darling. Um, I just think those players are going to be so massive in terms of they're going to play. So these are experienced players that know what to do in a game situation and make the most out of those moments. But they're going to be massive for the improvement of the young kids as well. We've spoken about it before. I just don't think this team is in a position where their goal can be anything but to make that jump up the ladder. It would be a failure for me if they were bottom 4 still. And I get why people still have them there, but I just don't think it's something that can happen in 2025. So North Melbourne 13th for me. In at 12th, I've got the Adelaide Crows. A lot of people have them in finals. I don't really blame anyone for doing so. Um, but I'm just not as convinced with this one. This one's more of a vibes pick. I just look at the Crows and the players they've got, and I'm not filled with any optimism, and fans won't be happy if it happens and they happen to finish 12th. They'll miss pretty comfortably again, but I'm just not convinced. I feel like I'd be more convinced if they pulled together a fairly consistent year, didn't miss by a lot, and then improved well in the off season. I'd be more convinced. Or if they just made it, then I'd be convinced, obviously. But no, I'm just it doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence looking at their side. It just feels like it's going to be a slow build. They should have made finals 2 years ago and missed. They dropped far down last year and missed. Now they make that slight jump again, and then when they finally make it, it's this big sigh of relief. So I think that's where I kind of sit with the Crows. It's nothing too analytical. It's just purely vibes, honestly. In at 11th, I've got a team who I reckon probably 2 weeks ago I had them bottom four. And that is probably indicative of how hard they are to place. And that team is Essendon. And the reason I don't have them bottom four anymore is half trivial and and half actual just research. The trivial bit is that the last 2 years I put them 11th, and the last 2 years they've finished 11th. So it just felt right to finish the trifecta and put them 11th. The second reason is that I actually looked at their list and the players they've got. And I remember back to how they performed at the start of last year. And again, like obviously it's not indicative of the team that they are because they couldn't hold it together. But they were very good at times last year. And this team hasn't changed much. And I just can't see a world where they're um what's the word? Where they're consistently poor. I feel like is the best way to explain it. Like they're gonna have their up patches, they're gonna have their competitive games against teams, they're gonna compete well against Collingwood, they always do. They're gonna have good games at Marvel because that place is just rocking when Essendon are playing there. And I just can't see them being that bad. Is the team ready? No. Do they still need a few pieces? Yes. Do they still need to get games into those young kids, Caddy, Kako, so on and so forth? Yes. But I just don't think this team can be that bad. And that's why I've got them in 11th. Again, if I'm right again, maybe they're just perennial 11th. 10th, this is where it starts to get juicy. So 10, 9, and 8 are all very good teams. They could easily win the flag, honestly. Because from 10 to 1 for me is just like actual quality. 10, 9, 8 was really hard because it was one spot for three teams for me. In 10th, I've gone Port Adelaide. Um, tough, really tough. Off the back of the Ken thing and the announcement of this succession plan going into 2025, and it just something doesn't sit right for me with Port Adelaide. And I had them missing anyway prior to that, I think. Just off the back of the prelim final exit and the straight sets exits, and they just haven't been able to get it done, and that obviously weighs on a team. You would think. But the Ken thing just doesn't sit right for me because of the timing. Like it feels like you're going into 2025, you should be in a place to contend again, and you announce this succession plan. And is it almost an admission? I think Kane Corn said this actually. Is it an admission that you don't think you're going to get it done under Ken? I don't. Do I necessarily buy into that? No, but I think there's weight to it. And then you add the key position injuries, which I think are massive. You lose Todd Marshall, Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, Asava Radaglia for extended periods of time. So I think they're underdone in those positions. The midfield's great. I've talked about their midfield before. I love their midfield. Zach Butters is gone for a bit as well, though, which is massive. But I just feel like things aren't. It's another sort of vibey pick, but it has this analysis to it. Um, I just something doesn't feel right about Port Adelaide. If they were to make top four and give it another really good crack in Ken's last year, doing it for him wouldn't be shocked at all. But something just doesn't feel right. It's a bit like my Melbourne pick last year. It just didn't feel right to have them in there given things that had happened. Granted, two very different scenarios in terms of the things that happened, but yeah, just it doesn't feel right. So Port Adelaide 10th for me. Ninth is going to ruffle a few feathers, but I've seen a lot of people doing this as well because it has some weight to it. I've got Hawthorn in at ninth. I made this ladder and I set it in stone and I said to myself, I'm not going to change it. And the one thing that makes me question the position that I have Hawthorn in is the coach. Because I think Sam Mitchell is certified. He's so good, such a good coach. And I think in due time, like, if he's not already the best coach in the comp, he's going to be the best coach in the comp in the next 2, 3 years. With Hawthorn, I've had to sort of obviously seasons are different and you can't always compare the performances of one season to the next. But I look at Hawthorn's performance last year. It started very poorly, and then they come out and they won how many games in a row? Like 15, 16. It was something ridiculous. Their back half of the year, their back two-thirds of the year really were just absurd. Like absurdly good. And it propelled them in and they finished seventh. I don't think, and we'll talk about this in bold calls later. It kind of spoils one of my bold calls, but I think they're going to start poorly again because they've got a hard start to the year. And I think a lot of Hawthorn fans are looking at this start to the year and thinking, if we can win a few of these games, we're going to look good. But if we can't win three of these first six, it's going to get a bit dicey. Because what are the odds of them going into the back half of that season again and just steamrolling everyone the way they did last year? I don't know. I think to play devil's advocate to all my points so far, them having done that last year will be a great confidence boost for them if they're faced with a situation again where they're 1-5, 1-6, and they have to work their way back again. But I think it's just a bit of a tall order. They're going to miss out by the skin of their teeth because I think they're going to have another strong finish again. But what are the odds that they win as many games as they did again? That's my point. I also think their forward line had a really good run last year. You look at that group of small forwards: Dylan Moore, Jack Ginnivan, Nick Watson, Connor McDonald. I think it all came together at a very good time for that group. And I don't know if they maintain the same consistency, especially since they're pretty, apart from Dylan Moore, they're pretty young as a group. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Again, much like Port, wouldn't be shocked at all if they just walked it because they showed last year that they have the ability to really take it to teams. But yeah, it's just where I've got them. What I will say is this year will be really important to the point of what I said about that small forward group, about just getting more games into those younger kids and really letting it settle because this team, when they've got a significant stretch of football together, is going to be, they're going to be good. They're going to be really good. They're already really good, but I just think dip back down before you come back up. It's common. So yeah, Hawthorn ninth could come back to bite me, but yeah. So in eighth, the team that I was really toying with swapping with either of those last two teams was Collingwood. Um, Collingwood was a tough one to place because I understand the criticisms that come with Collingwood having put all their eggs in one basket and really relying on this team and these top end players that they've put together to produce one more time before they get too old and they take that dip. And I also understand that it's very feasible that injuries happen and they don't have the depth to compete. And that's kind of why I've got them eighth because injuries are unavoidable. And there are going to be times this year where I think they field players that aren't really up to scratch, in my opinion. However, when they're mostly fit, Collingwood are going to be a problem. And I think that best 22 is very good. And they've done a good job. Houston obviously coming in is massive for that defense. And I just think they've got this 22 in a place where it's ready to compete. However, as I said, injuries are unavoidable. They're going to happen. And there are going to be times where there are players that aren't really up to scratch. So I don't think overall they're going to be as good as, especially the top end teams, the teams I've got in the top four, top five. I don't think they're going to be as good as those teams, but it will be enough to make the eight, I think. And from there, final situation, teams that perform under pressure consistently, you look at Collingwood. And if they're fit in finals, God knows what happens. But eighth, I've got Collingwood. Seventh, here we go. Feels like everyone does this every year, and I don't think I've ever been guilty of it. I don't remember putting this team in the eight ever. I might have been. Someone might prove me wrong here, but I'm going with Gold Coast in seventh because the time is now for them to do something with the players they've got. The window's open now. Is it a premiership window? Maybe I don't know, but they need to start making finals and start competing. They've got arguably the best coach in the land, a myriad of top picks. They've got one of the best midfields in the comp. They've got two outstanding key defenders. They've brought in two very good halfbacks to improve their rebounding capability. They've got outstanding forwards as well. Why can't this team compete? Why can't they? I might have underdone them by putting them seventh. They could easily jump up massively, but at a bare minimum, I've got them seventh. They should be making finals. I think they will make finals. And then, as we said, from there, God knows. They've been outstanding as a home side. They've made, I was going to say Metricon Stadium. What's it called now? People's First Stadium. They made that place a fortress. So when they start being able to play away from home, this team's going to be very dangerous and very hard to stop. I think that's going to start creeping in this year. They're gonna look a lot better on a more consistent basis. So yeah, Gold Coast seventh for me. Sixth, tough, tough. I've gone with Sydney. Sydney for me, dominant last year, unbelievable. Like if they hadn't have lost that grand final by as much as they did and been dominated in the way that they did, I'd probably have them top four again. But it's just undeniable. Undeniable. I'm not saying it's going to happen because it doesn't always happen, but it's undeniable the effect that games like that can have on a football team. And then you have the transition as well from Longmire to Cox. So I don't know how different their coaching structure and the way the team plays is going to look. That's something that we'll see on Friday night and moving into the season. But it's just a lot of unknowns, and I don't know if I'm comfortable putting all my faith into them again. The reason I've got them in six is that because they could easily miss, but they could easily finish top two again. So it felt like a good middle position to leave Sydney. Obviously, they're without Errol Goulden for an undisclosed amount of time. I believe he's their best player, which is another big reason for where they sit on the ladder for me. Could have easily had him fourth or fifth with him, but I just don't know when he's coming back. I also don't think their key position stocks are as impressive for me as the teams above them as well, which is important. Um, Joel Amartey's looked really good in preseason, to be fair, but Logan McDonald's injured, so I don't know how that forward line looks to start the year. Tom McDonald actually is the player that will play there, but again, I don't know how he's going to perform up there. Defensively, Lewis Malikan looked really good last year. Who do they pair him with? It's just very interesting. But yeah, they could easily be really good again. But those external factors creep in, and you look at it and you think maybe they take another dip again. A lot like they did when they lost the 2022 grand final. Take a little dip. They finished eighth, still made finals, still looked really good at times, finished the year really well, and then jump back up depending on what their off season looks like at the end of the year. I think that's probably what my gut says with Sydney. But again, could be anything. Probably the hardest team to place out of this lot, I think. But hopefully Swans fans agree. I don't know what the vibe is in Swan circles as well. Let me know. Fifth, I've got Geelong. Um, I've had them as high as second. I don't think I've had them any lower than fifth. I've learnt my lesson. I actually don't remember where I put them last year, to be fair. I don't remember if I had them in the eight. I might have had them top four. But just generally speaking, I think we've all learnt our lesson to not doubt this team anymore because they're just gonna get the job done every time. I love their forward line. Um, Jeremy Cameron's obviously Jeremy Cameron. And then you've got Shannon Neal in there taking that Tom Hawkins spot. They've got great small forwards, Stengel, Manor, Brian Myers. I think he's one of the best in the comp. I think their defense is very good as well. It always seems to hold up pretty well. The midfield is where the question marks are. Obviously, it's not as they don't really have top end talent that other teams do. Max Holmes will probably play through there. I think he's probably their best. Danger when he's fit is very good. And then from there, it's a lot of kids, a lot of different people going through there. Bailey Smith maybe plays in the middle. I'm not sure if he goes to a wing, if he goes into the middle. I'm not the Geelong coach. I'm not Chris Scott. But I think they're just going to be very hard to stop. It's going to be a very typical Geelong season. Maybe not the best team in the comp, but just really hard to stop on any given night. And it's going to frustrate us all. But I've learnt not to doubt them. I've learnt not to doubt them. Fourth place. We're into the top four now. I've gone with the Dockers. This team's ready to. I don't see many holes in this team. I think their midfield is unbelievable. Hayden Young's obviously not playing for a little while at the start of the season. I don't know how long. Should have checked that. However, Sarong, Brayshaw, Shy Bolton going through the middle there. Draftees look very good as well. Murphy Reed comes in there. He can play there. Their defense is probably one of the best in the comp. Probably top three for me. Just an outstanding backline. I think that's where they're gonna win so many games this year. Pierce, Chapman, Luke Ryan, Brennan Cox, Jordan Clark, just unreal. And then their forward line, a good small forward group that they needed to improve a little bit, and they did. Obviously, Bolton can play there, but they brought in Quinton Narkle to add to Switkowski, Michael Frederick. They've got good players there. And the key forwards, that duo, Tracy and Jai Amos, I think is just terrific. So it's really all coming together. The only thing that stops me from putting them higher is that little bit of inexperience, I think, in big game situations. So they're going to be competitive against some really good teams this year, and I don't know if it's always going to go their way purely because of them being sort of the new kids on the block a little bit. But aside from that, I think they're going to be very good. And I think late season they're really going to come into their own as well. So 304th for me. Third, I've got Carlton. Is there perhaps a hint of bias in this call? Maybe. I'm fairly self-aware. I know that me being a Carlton fan, I'm going to see us in a different lens because a lot of people have us missing. A lot of people have us missing. But on that token, a lot of neutrals also have us competing top four. I've heard people say we're going to win the flag that aren't Carlton fans. So again, I think we're another hard one to place, much like Sydney and what I said before. I think the glaring issue that everyone's speaking about is the injuries. Obviously, some say they derailed our season last year. I think they were a big reason. I don't think they were the only reason, and we'll talk about that later. But again, it seems like there's an injury problem at Carlton. Charlie Curnow might not start the year. Sam Walsh has pulled up injured. Nick Newman out for the year. Jagger Smith out for the year. So there's that injury cloud hovering over Icon Park. However, I think it will turn out okay. And I've done this prediction based, much like my Collingwood pick, I've done this prediction based on the premise that we stay mostly fit. I think when we stay mostly fit, we're as competitive as anyone, and we've shown that time and time again. And if you think any different, I'd just think at this point it's because you don't like Carlton, which is fair. If you don't like Carlton, do what you want. But it's there to see. It's tangible evidence that we've been able to compete in the past. We made a prelim 2 years ago with this same team. So yeah, for that reason, I put us third. Again, I'll talk about it a little bit in a minute in the bold calls, but our defense last year, I think, was nowhere near up to scratch. And at our best, our defense has been very good in terms of points against matching up to the other teams in the comp. So I think that's going to improve a lot this year, and that's part of my prediction here as well. That I think when that defense really takes a jump up, we're going to look better as a whole because the defense last year was poor. It was ranked 14th in the comp for points against. So yeah, I think we're going to finish third. Brian Cook was on something last night, and for some reason I can't think to the life of me what he was on. But he spoke about their aspirations to make top four and compete. So it seems like internally that's the goal. I think it has to happen because we still haven't made top four since 2000, I think. So that has to happen for us to take the next step. We have to be one of the four best teams in the comp and then compete in postseason. So yeah, third for me. Moving on to second, I've got Brisbane. Brisbane are another team that were tough to place purely based on the fact that the forward line is going to look a lot different this year. And Joe Danaher is such a massive part of their structure and how they played and how they ran over teams essentially. Had Joe Danaher still been in this team, I'd probably have them first, and I'd probably have them walking the flag as well. However, I think the forward line's still going to be very good. If they run Hipwood and whoever else, might be Sam Day, might be Ty Gallop. I don't know. Again, I'm not Chris Fagan, but I think those that small forward group around them. I'm looking at guys like Cal Archie, who's pretty good in the air and will be able to really contribute in that area. Lincoln McCarthy is coming back. Then you've got Kyle Oman, you've got Charlie Cameron, Cam Rayner, Zach Bailey. They should be able to still pull something together and really they'll dominate. They will dominate. They're the best small forward group in the comp, I think. Those six, just outstanding. So I think they'll still be good enough. The defense is still fantastic. Midfield's still fantastic. It's a flag winning team, for God's sake. And you think about how they started last year as well. They look quite poor. And I think the second half of the year was more indicative of what this team is and how they will perform on a more consistent basis this year. So I'm pretty confident that even without Joe Danaher, they'll be very good. It's just when we get up to obviously the team above them and then that grand final, we'll see whether they land there. That means in at first, I've got the GWS Giants. I'm not going to speak on them too much. I think the reason I've had them first pretty much most of this offseason, the reason I think they're as good as they are, is that I just don't think there's really a weakness in their side. Um, I mean, I guess we could start with the forward line. Jesse Hogan, Coleman medalist. Toby Green, one of the best in the comp. Then you've got guys like Darcy Jones, really young, vibrant forwards that are there. You've got the young key forwards, Cadman, Riccardi, who can play there. Jake Stringer coming in there, I think, is massive. There's a chance he doesn't really perform to the level, but I think, particularly at Essendon, there were times where he was kind of the guy and kind of a target. And I don't think he'll be that at the Giants at all. I think he'll be playing with a lot more freedom. He won't necessarily be the main target for key defenders to match up on. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for him to play good footy and make an impact. And I think that's probably what's going to happen when he gets into this team. Then you move to the midfield, and it's just A graders. Tom Green, Josh Kelly, Stephen Canelio is there, and you know what, he can bring at his best. I think Finn Callahan's going to take a massive jump this year. Lockie Whitfield has the ability to get up the ground, and he's one of the best in the comp, for sure. So I think they're just outstanding through there. Then the back line, you've got two of the best key defenders in the comp easily, probably the best key defensive duo in the comp in Sam Taylor and Jack Buckley. Connor Iden, I think, is fantastic. I've mentioned Lockie Whitfield before. If he's coming off halfback, that is just they're just so well-rounded, I think, in what they do. They can defend, they can rebound. Their midfield is strong, but it's quick. Their forward line, like I said, I wasn't going to talk a lot about them, but I feel like I'm waffling. The point is, I think this team is ready. I think it's very good. The only question mark is that straight sets exit, because I said on this podcast it was the worst, easily the worst straight sets exit I've ever seen in my life. And it's a question as to whether that weighs on them at all coming into this season. Obviously, there was all the controversy as well. We don't know how that's going to weigh on them. But in saying that, I think when they get rolling this season, and if they stay fit and the consistency is there, they're your team. They're your team. So with that, that is my ladder. Look over it. Tell me what you think. Leave your comments. Leave your suggestions. What have I stuffed up? What have I gotten right? Is there anything that I didn't mention that I should take note of? Who knows? Let me know. But that's my ladder. Moving on to some awards and some different categories now before we reveal our runner-up and our premier. Starting off with the recruit of the year, this one is an absolute no-brainer for me. Obviously, there are some very good ones. Bailey Smith, you've got the two Hawthorn key defenders, Battle and Barras. You've got Liam Baker, I think is very good for the Eagles. Dan Houston at the Pies as well. But I just think it's Shy Bolton. It's just Shy Bolton. I think when I account for the fact that I think the Dockers are going to be a lot better, and you look at what they lacked and what they get out of Shy Bolton coming in. We've spoken about it before. I think Shy Bolton is the exact kind of player that they needed. Adds a little bit more dynamicism to that midfield when he's in there. But going forward, he's going to be so difficult to stop and so impactful, in my opinion. And I think in either of those areas, he's going to provide a lot more than what they previously had, if that makes sense. So again, if they're in that top four and they're making that improvement, I think Shy is going to be a big part of that. So for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Breakout star of the year. I kind of struggled with this one. Um, there was no player that I looked at where I immediately went, yeah, that's the guy. So I thought it would be easiest for me to just keep it close to home for this one, go with what I know, and pick a Carlton player. And that's Cooper Lord. Um, he perhaps wasn't going to play early this year, um, purely due to a selection squeeze, because he's an inside midfielder. But the injury of Jagger Smith, as sad and as disappointing as that is, has opened up a massive opportunity for Cooper Lord to not only play, but play well as well. Because against St Kilda in that first match sim, he was probably our best player, I thought. Against GWS in that practice match, I thought he was fantastic again. Late last year when he played two, three games, whatever it was, I thought he was very good in all those games. And I think he's going to play. And learning under players like Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh, Adam Chera, who I think are all going to be very good this year, playing with those players and learning from those players, he's going to look. And our midfield's pretty dominant as well. Even last year when we struggled, still a very good clearance side. He's going to look very good. And I think by the end of the year, if you don't know the name Cooper Lord, you're going to know the name Cooper Lord by the end of the year. So that's my pick. Felt easiest to keep it close to home, and I think he's going to be very good this year. Moving on, we've got the All Australian picks. I've got a first time All Australian, and I've also got a surprise All Australian. I've done that because in the past, I think people have been guilty of picking first time All Australians who are already very good as surprise All Australians, and it's not really a surprise. So I thought I'd do both. And we'll start with the first time All Australian, and that player for me is Noah Anderson from the Gold Coast Suns. I think they're going to improve. He's their captain now, firstly. Secondly, he's gonna probably be their best player. And I think at times he's been a little bit inconsistent between home and away form in the past. At home last year, like his home form alone, he's probably one of the best midfielders in the comp. And obviously with the side becoming more consistent as a whole and becoming that finals threat, I think Noah Anderson is in for his biggest year yet, but a very big year, in and of itself. Surprise All Australian is always a hard one to pick. And the reason I say that is because, say, for example, you pick a midfielder, then you look at it and you think, how is he going to be better than the likes of Nick Daicos, Patrick Cripps? Not better, but match that level. What I've done, though, is I've gone with a position that I think will be easier to get into. There are less small forwards in the All Australian team, but I feel as though if you hit a certain threshold as a small forward, you're a very good chance. And I think Kyle Lohmann, for me, obviously I spoke about him in that Surprise All Australians video I did last year, was actually my last podcast. But I think the level that he performed at last year, and then looking at how he finished the year, that grand final and that final series, he's going to take a lot of momentum into this year. There's going to be a stronger focus, as I said, on those Brisbane small forwards. I think they're going to have to perform a lot better um, to leverage out the impact that is being left by Joe Danaher. And I think Kyle Lohmann is going to be massive for them next year. He's kind of hitting an age now where you're going to see a lot more improvement. And if he can match that Charlie Cameron output, perhaps even surpass him, I think he's a massive chance. If he kicks 40 to 50 goals, there's no reason why he can't be in it. So Kyle Lohmann for me. Moving on to the rising star, it's sad. Jagger Smith would have been a no-brainer for me, because he just looked fantastic in preseason. But obviously he's injured for the year. So 2026, Jagger Smith. However, we had to look elsewhere for 2025, and for me, it's another Brisbane player. It's Levi Ashcroft. I think the midfielders in this crop are very good. I considered Sid Draper. I considered Harvey Langford as well at the D's. I think he's going to play a lot of footy. Someone else I consider as well. Nate Caddy at the Bombers I also considered, because I think he's going to do a lot better this year. But yeah, Levi, I think watching them throughout the preseason, and seeing the faith that they've already put into this kid, playing a lot of midfield minutes, even with the midfield group that they have already being one of the best in the comp, it seems like he's going to have a lot of work to do this season, and I think he's going to play a lot of football, and he looked really good in those first two games this year. So if he plays, I think he's going to play well, and he's probably going to rise above the rest in that case. So Levi Ashcroft for me, fairly confident with that one. Coleman medal. This one was hard. It was hard. Really hard. Obviously, so my gut at the start said Jeremy Cameron. I kind of moved away from that because I think Geelong's forward line as a whole are so good and so prolific that I don't know if he's going to have the same level of output playing with those players, if that makes sense. Then I thought about Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay, and I just don't think either of them, particularly this season as a duo, will be able to have the individual impact that would be enough for them to win it. Then I thought about Jesse Hogan. Obviously, he's going to be out for a little bit with a thumb injury, but even when he comes back, I just don't know if he is in a position to go back to back. A little bit similar to the Jeremy Cameron argument I have, where the forward line is just so good as a whole that he's not going to be able to have that same impact, in my opinion. Um, I thought about a couple of other players, but I've landed on Nick Larkey to win his first Coleman medal, and the reason is I don't know how many goals he scored last year, firstly. I could check that now. Just quickly, Lucky. He kicked 46 goals last year, which was down on his 71 from 2023, but it's still a very significant amount. And I think the way North are progressing, as we talked about with them on the ladder, they have to be better this year, and I think they will be better. I think their midfield is a lot better. And because of that, I think his service will be up once again. Having Jack Darling next to him, I don't know how many goals he loses because of that, if you want to say that. But I think his service will be up massively, and I think he's going to have another really big year. And he's dead accurate as well. Such a good kick of the football. So yeah, if he puts another 70 on the board, it should be his to win, I think. Him being that sole target at the Roos compared to a Jeremy Cameron who has a strong forward line around him, as we said, or a Jesse Hogan for the same reason, or Charlie and Harry who are together as a duo. I think that for me is what gets it over the line. That they're going to be a bit better. He's going to have the service, and I think he's going to have a very good year because of that. Brownlow medal, I think, is perhaps the easiest out of all of these. It's Nick Dacos quite comfortably, in my opinion. Obviously, last year was massive for him. Second most votes in a season ever, which wasn't enough for him to win it, which is crazy. Um, but I think you look at the premier midfielders in this competition: Cripper, Bont, Sarong, Anderson, whoever you want to look at. And I feel like the midfielders that these players have around them are just a lot better than what Nick has around him at Collingwood at this point, in my opinion. Pendlebury's aging, Mitchell's aging. De Goey, I don't think is necessarily the level of some of those other midfielders that I was talking about that are around those players. So I just think Nick Dacos has an opportunity to. He's just the man at Collingwood. And I think more often than not, when they win, he's going to stand out. And I think he's going to pull a lot of votes again. I don't know if the umpires will perhaps be more vigilant of just throwing votes at these players every time after what happened last year, but I still think he's going to get a lot of votes because it's just going to be hard to look past him in many of these games, in my opinion. So yeah, the fact that he's the clear standout at his club is enough for me to think that if they make the eight and they win 13, 14 games, it'll be enough for him to get it pretty comfortably, in my opinion. Which brings me to the runner-up in the Premier for 2025. Now, part of this is almost me wanting this because of what this game would represent and what it would mean for the competition and how significant it would be if this was the grand final. But also, these are just two very good teams who should be looking to make it all the way. So, runner-up, I've gone with Fremantle, and the Premiers, I've gone with GWS. Now, what this means, if you haven't caught on, is that the winner uh, would be winning their first premiership. Both teams are on 0. So it would just be a massive grand final. I'll start with Freo. I toyed with Brisbane. I thought about putting Carlton there just out of pure bias, even though I don't really think we'll make it. I thought about Geelong. Freo for me, out of those four, though, just look the most complete almost. The only thing that deters me is that lack of finals experience. How will they handle that big game pressure? I think they might struggle with that in the home and away season against these big teams. But I think the quality of this playing group in finals would shine through. And I think they have the ability to really do something here. So I'm pretty happy with them being my runner-up, in all honesty. And the Premier GWS, as I said, I patted on about it when I was talking about the ladder prediction. I just think they're the best team there. As complete as I think teams like Fremantle are, I just think GWS are so much more complete. Um, Again, I spoke about the straight sets exit and how that might affect them and whatnot, but I don't think it will. I really don't think it will, and I think they've had a couple of years now where they've been in finals and they've almost competed and they've played in prelim and they've been in and around it. And I think the quality of this team is enough now to do it and finally win that first flag because they've been in and around it for so long, apart from that 1 or 2 years where they dipped before they came back in. So yeah, I think they're ready and I think they're going to do it, the Giants. Not much more to add there. Okay, before we wrap up, I've got six bold calls for the 2025 AFL season. Starting off with the Dockers, and I think that Fremantle will not lose a single game at Optus Stadium in 2025. I'm not sure if I spoke about in the ladder prediction that I think they have to make Optus Stadium a fortress, but I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. They have to make it the toughest ground to play at in the country for them to be able to compete to the levels I have them competing. The big tough games here are the first one in round two against the Swans. And then they play a few big teams there. The Lions, the Blues, the Pies, and the Hawks are probably the four main ones. It's not going to be easy. They're probably not going to win all those games. That's why it's a bold call. But if they want to compete, as I said, they need to make that place a fortress and it would be a huge statement to dispatch of all those teams at Optus Stadium in 2025. So that's my first bold call. Number two, Richmond will lose two games in 2025 by 150 points or more. I was going to go with one game by 150 or more, but it felt a little bit bland because we saw Sydney do it against West Coast 2 years ago. So we know it's kind of possible in the current climate. But I just think that the position that Richmond are in, the young players, the complete reset that they've undergone, two games losing by 150 would be something. I'd actually be pretty confident that they might lose one by 150. Two would be something. Two would be crazy. So yeah, have that one. That's one of my bold calls. Number three, we spoke a little bit about Hawthorn before and their slow start to the season last year and how difficult their start to the season this year could be with the fixture they have. My bold prediction is Hawthorn go 1-5 in their first six games. Now, Sydney in opening round. Essendon in the first round, which I think is the win out of those six games. Carlton, GWS in Tassie, and they're good there, but the way I've spoken about GWS, I think GWS have the ability to get that done. Port Adelaide in the last game of Gather Round, and then Geelong on Easter Monday. Those are the six games. So I think they get the Bombers. And after that, after those six games, they have the Eagles and the Tigers at home, and they probably go ham. But those first six are massive. And I have them losing five of them, and that feeds into my prediction that they're going to miss the eight. But if they win three of them, definitely four. If they win four, then they're in for a big year. If they win three of them, I think it's enough to have enough, what's the word? Momentum is the word, to take it into the second half of the year and really give it a crack and probably finish in the top eight. But I don't think they're going to do it. I think they'll go 1-5 in that first six of the year. Number four, Carlton's backline will once again rank top four for points against in 2025. Now, Carlton's defense, as I said before, let itself down pretty big time last year. I think it was a massive reason for where we found ourselves and how the year finished. 2022, they ranked sixth in the competition for points against, despite missing finals. Finished ninth, ranked sixth for points against. 2023, they ranked fourth, made a prelim. So pretty indicative, I think, that when it's hard for teams to score against you, you're going to finish in a pretty good position. And that season there is probably the biggest evidence. 2024, they ranked 14th for points against, so pretty dreadful in the grand scheme of things when you're a final side. Essendon, West Coast, Richmond, and North were the only teams that were worse. And I think that's a huge reason for why things fell apart last year. They need to jump back up in that category if they want to compete. Pretty simple. I like the moves we've made back there. Haynes looks great. Jack Silvani looks really good in that positional move. Wiedering has been fantastic as always, and you got Cow and McGovern. Sard and Hollands with their rebounding. The personnel is there for me. Um, so yeah, there needs to be massive improvement on that line, and I think there will be. So I think they'll rank top four again for points against, and that'll kind of coincide with the jump back into the top four that I've predicted. Number five, Nate Caddy and Isaac Kako will combine for 50 goals in 2025. Is it bold? Perhaps not. Tell me if this one's bold. I think it's bold. But I mean, they're essentially averaging a goal a game each, 25 each, around about. Caddy had 9 in 10 games last year, so he'd need to hop just above that goal a game mark. And then Kako as well. I mean, yeah, why can't they? Why can't they? Kako looked outstanding in preseason. Should be kicking a lot of goals for them in the future, but for him to kick a goal a game this year isn't out of the question. And then Caddy, I think, is going to improve a lot. So, yeah, big future for those two gentlemen, and I've got them combining for 50 in 2025. Maybe I should have gone more. Let me know. And finally, number six, a bit of a different one. A team outside of the top eight will have three All-Australian players. I don't know if this has actually happened before. It might have happened. I don't know if it's happened in recent history. But I'm looking at teams like, so the teams I have outside the eight, Port Adelaide having a Rosie, a Butters, and a Horn Francis, or someone random in there that performs well. I think they had three last year. I'm looking at perhaps a North Melbourne having had Sheasel and Jerry in the extended squad last year, having a third pop up and all be good enough to make the squad in their improvement. I'm looking at a team like Melbourne having Clary and Petrarca and whoever else. There are teams in this section that have really good players. I'm looking at like an Adelaide Crows having a Rankin, Dawson, and one other. So there are opportunities for this to happen. I don't know how bold this actually is. Probably should have done the research on that before I threw it out as a bold call, but we'll run with it. And if it's not bold, tell me. But yeah, a team outside the top eight will have three All-Australian players in 2025. And with that, we're done. That is predictions for 2025 in the books. Tell me what you think. Tell me what I got right. Tell me what I got wrong. Give me your predictions, please. But yeah, aside from that, all the social links are in the description. Follow those: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter as well. TikTok, I'm going to do a bit differently this year. The TikToks for the podcast are going to go on an actual podcast account. I was just posting them on my personal account last year. But yeah, they're all going to go there. But yeah, subscribe to the channel, comment, leave your suggestions, share. That'll be lovely. Leave a like, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next week.